The stars hung silent and cold in the void. Among them drifted a sleek vessel, its hull dark except for the occasional blinking of status lights. The name Dreamwalker was painted in faded letters across its side. Inside, 4 humans floated, in transparent pods filled with bluish gel, their vital signs displaying steady rhythms on nearby monitors. They had been asleep for a very long time. Commander Susan Taylor's face was peaceful in her suspended animation. Beside her, Security Chief Diane Scott's pod hummed quietly. Across the narrow chamber, Science Officer Alan Reeves and Engineer Kevin Phillips completed the small crew. None had stirred for over 300 years. The ship's AI maintained its quiet vigil, running system checks and course corrections while its human occupants slept. The Dreamwalker had been sent out as an exploration vessel, but somewhere along its journey, protocols had changed. Now it drifted at the edge of an uninhabited star system, its presence marked only by a repeating signal that broadcast in dozens of languages. 12 light-years away, the warship Dominance cut through space with purpose. Captain Zexnar of the Eyes, Valkorian Empire, stood on the command deck, his scaled skin reflecting the blue glow of the ship's displays. His species had only achieved spaceflight 2 centuries ago, but their rapid expansion had already claimed 17 star systems. The Valkorians were hungry for more. "Captain, we're picking up an unusual signal," said First Officer Vex Lear, her clawed fingers moving across the control panel. "It appears to be an automated beacon." Zexnar's vertical pupils narrowed. "Origin? Unknown. Design? Not matching any known species in our database." Vex Lear's voice carried a note of concern. "The signal contains language patterns. Our computers are working on translation." The captain moved to her station, towering over her with his 9-foot frame. "Show me." The screen flickered to life, displaying a simple vessel unlike the angular designs of Valkorian ships. It was smaller than their warship but had an elegant efficiency to its shape. "Translation complete," announced the ship's computer. The message appeared on screen in the jagged script of the Valkorian language. "Warning, human occupants in hibernation. Do not disturb. Contact Protocol Alpha 7 for diplomatic communication." "Humans?" Zexnar spoke the word with unfamiliarity. "Query the database." Vexlear worked the controls. "No significant entries, Captain. Only vague mentions in some ancient texts acquired from the Arenthi traders. They are listed as a sleeping species with no known active settlements." Science Officer Moxtier approached from his station, his movements careful and measured as befitted the eldest crew member. "Captain, I recommend caution. There are old stories among the elder races." "Stories are for hatchlings," Zexnar interrupted. "Facts are what the Empire requires." He studied the small ship on the display. "A primitive vessel with hibernation technology. Interesting. Prepare a boarding party. I want to know everything about these humans and their technology." Mox tears. Neck frills flattened in disapproval. "Captain, the warning is explicit. Perhaps we should—" "The warning is from a dormant species with outdated technology," Zexnar said dismissively. "The Empire advances through bold action, not timid restraint." "Ready the boarding shuttles." "Yes, Captain," Vex Lear responded, though her eyes darted briefly to Moxtier with something like concern. 6 hours later, a Valkorian shuttle attached itself to the hull of the Dreamwalker. The boarding team, led by engineer Draz Kun, cut through the airlock with plasma torches. Their environmental suits protected them from the ship's cold interior as they entered. "Life support is active but minimal," reported Draz Kun through his comm unit. "Atmosphere is breathable for us, but temperature is low." The team moved through the narrow corridors of the human vessel, recording everything with their scanning devices. They marveled at the strange design choices. The ship was built for bodies much smaller than their own, forcing them to duck through doorways. "Engineering team, proceed to the propulsion systems," ordered Vex Lear from the Dominance. "Science team, locate the data storage centers." Drazkun led his engineers toward the rear of the vessel. Meanwhile, the science team discovered the hibernation chamber. "We've found the occupants," reported science lead Traz Fen. 4 specimens, all in suspended animation. Remarkable technology. It appears their biological processes have been slowed to near zero. Captain Zexnar's voice came through the comm. Are they alive? Affirmative. Their monitoring systems indicate stable life signs. Excellent. Take biological samples for analysis. I want to know everything about these creatures. Traz Fen approached one of the pods, the one containing Alan Reeves. She activated her sampling device, a thin probe designed to penetrate the pod's surface and extract cellular material without compromising the container. In the engineering section, Draz Kun had made a discovery of his own. Captain, their propulsion system is unlike anything I've seen. It appears to use principles similar to our own fold space technology, but with significant differences. Can we adapt it for our use? Zexnar asked eagerly. Possibly. I need to access their control systems. Draz Kun's claws tapped at the human console, attempting to interface his translator with the ship's computer. Back in the hibernation chamber, Traz Fen's probe penetrated the gel surrounding Alan Reeves. As it withdrew its sample, a small alarm began to sound from the pod's control panel. What's happening? Demanded Vexleer. Unknown, replied Traz Fen, suddenly nervous. The container appears to be... She never finished her sentence. The pod's upper section suddenly hissed and began to slide open. The monitoring screens around the room flashed with urgent warnings as all 4 pods initiated emergency revival procedures. In engineering, Draz Kun's attempts to access the propulsion systems had triggered the ship's defense protocols. The Dreamwalkers, AI, dormant for centuries but ever vigilant, detected the intrusion and classified it as hostile. Throughout the ship, hidden security measures activated, doors sealed, trapping the Valkorian teams in separate sections of the vessel. In the hibernation chamber, the remaining 3 pods began their opening sequence as Alan Reeves's eyes fluttered open for the first time in 300 years. On the Dominance, Captain Zexnar watched with growing concern as his boarding teams reported the ship's sudden activity. Get them out of there, he ordered. We're trying, Captain, Vexleer responded, but something is jamming our transporters. On the main screen they watched as the life signs of the humans strengthened. One by one they were waking up. Science Officer Mox Tier stepped forward, his neck frills fully extended in alarm. Captain, we must withdraw immediately. There is an old saying among the elder races about humans. What saying? Zexnar asked, irritation clear in his voice. Mox Tier's voice was grave. The one rule of the galaxy, don't wake the humans. Inside the Dreamwalker, Susan Taylor opened her eyes to the emergency lights flashing around her. Through the fog of hibernation, one thought came into clear focus as she saw the alien figures in her ship. We are not alone, and we are under attack. Susan Taylor's body felt heavy as she pushed herself up from the hibernation pod. Her muscles screamed in protest after centuries of disuse. The emergency revival drugs pumped through her system, fighting to clear the fog from her mind. She blinked, rapidly, trying to focus on the strange figures in her ship. Intruders, she croaked, her voice raw from centuries of silence. Security Protocol Alpha. Across from her, Diane Scott was already moving despite her weakened state. Years of security training had prepared her to act even in the worst conditions. She reached for the emergency weapon locker beside her pod. In the engineering section, Draz Kun and his team found themselves trapped as doors sealed around them. The ship's lights changed from soft blue to harsh red. A mechanical voice spoke, in a language they couldn't understand. What's happening? One of the engineers asked, panic rising in his voice. The defense systems are activating, Draz Kun replied, trying to override the door controls. We need to get back to the shuttle. In the hibernation chamber, Traz Fen backed away from Alan Reeves as he struggled to sit up. His eyes, still adjusting to the light, widened at the sight of the tall, scaled aliens in his ship. What the... he managed before breaking into a coughing fit. We come in peace, Traz Fen said through her translator, the words coming out in broken English. No harm intended. Kevin Phillips, the engineer, was the third to wake. He looked around in confusion before spotting the aliens. Commander, he called to Susan, we've got company. Susan gripped the edge of her pod, steadying herself. "Who are you? And why are you on my ship?" she demanded of the aliens. Before Traz Fen could answer, the ship shuddered as the docked Valkorian shuttle suddenly detached on emergency protocols from the Dominance. The sudden movement threw everyone off balance. "Captain, we've lost contact with the science team," Vexlear reported on the Dominance's bridge. "The boarding shuttle has returned but only contains the engineering team." Zexnar hissed in frustration. "What about Traz Fen and her team? Still aboard the human vessel? We're picking up increased energy readings. The ship is powering up its systems." On the Dreamwalker, Susan had made it to the command console. Her fingers, still clumsy from hibernation, moved across the familiar controls. "Ship status," she ordered. The AI responded immediately. "Emergency revival complete. 4 intruders detected in hibernation section. 3 intruders escaped via shuttlecraft. Defense systems active. Are we under attack? Unknown. Sensors detect larger vessel holding position at safe distance." Diane had managed to open the weapons locker and now held a stun pistol trained on the alien scientists. "Don't move," she ordered. Traz Fen raised her hands in what she hoped was a universal gesture of surrender. "No harm," she repeated. "Scientific mission only." Alan had finally regained enough strength to stand. "They took samples," he said, noticing the small puncture mark on his arm. "Why?" Kevin made his way to a nearby console. "Commander, I'm checking ship systems. Looks like they were trying to access our propulsion technology." Susan's face hardened. "So not just a friendly visit, then?" She turned to the aliens. "You boarded our ship without permission and invaded our bodies while we slept. In my book, that's an act of hostility." On the Dominance, Moxtier studied the ancient texts he had hurriedly pulled from the database. "Captain, I've found more information on humans," he said urgently. Zexnar joined him at the console. "What does it say?" "According to these Arenthi records, humans were once a major power in this sector. They expanded rapidly through multiple star systems, but then mysteriously disappeared about 300 years ago." Disappeared? The text suggests they entered some form of collective hibernation. But there's a warning here. Moxtier pointed to a passage. "It says that the elder races convinced humans to sleep because their aggressive expansion was destabilizing the galaxy." Vexlear looked up from her station. "Captain, the human ship is activating its communication array." Back on the Dreamwalker, Susan was establishing contact with Earth's automated defense network while Kevin and Diane secured the alien prisoners. "This is Commander Susan Taylor, IDC 45632, Dreamwalker Expedition. Emergency Protocol Lazarus. Repeat, Emergency Protocol Lazarus." For several long moments there was only static. Then a synthetic voice responded. "Commander Taylor, this is Guardian. Lazarus Protocol acknowledged. Status report required. We were awakened from hibernation by an unknown alien species. They boarded without permission and took biological samples. We have 4 of them in custody. There's a larger vessel nearby that appears to be their mothership." Understood. Defense. Grid activating. All human military installations being notified. Revival procedures initiating at all colony sites. Alan looked up in shock. "All colonies? That's over 50 worlds." Susan nodded grimly. "Standard protocol for first contact gone wrong. We don't know who these aliens are or what their intentions might be." Kevin approached with a worried expression. "Commander, I've been checking the ship's logs. We've been asleep for over 300 years. Susan felt a chill run through her. 300 years. Everyone they knew would be long dead. Even if those on Earth were also in hibernation, the world they knew was gone. "I need answers," she said, turning to the alien prisoners. "And you're going to provide them." On the Dominance, alarms suddenly blared across the bridge. "Captain," called the sensor officer, "we're detecting enormous energy spikes from multiple locations across this sector." Moxtier looked up from the ancient texts, his face pale beneath his scales. "It's happening. They're waking up." "Explain," demanded Zexnar. "The records say that humans agreed to sleep because they were too dangerous, too unpredictable for the galactic community. But they left failsafes. If one group was threatened, all would awaken. The tactical display showed new power signatures, appearing throughout nearby star systems. Long-dormant stations and bases were coming to life. We need to destroy that ship now, Vex Lear suggested, before they can fully activate their systems. Zexnar considered this, but Mox Tyr shook his head vigorously. It's too late, Captain. The signal has already gone out, and there's something else. He pointed to another passage in the text. This says that human military technology was highly advanced. The elder races feared them not just for their aggression, but for their innovation. A new alarm sounded. The communications officer turned with wide eyes. Captain, we're being hailed by Earth. Earth? The human homeworld. It's over 100 light years from here. Zexnar frowned. How can they be contacting us already? I don't know, sir, but the signal is clear and directed specifically at us. On screen, Zexnar ordered, straightening his posture. The screen flickered to life, showing not another alien but a human face, an older male with stern features and gray hair. This is Admiral Jack Nelson of Earth Command to the vessel threatening our exploration ship. You have exactly 1 hour to release our people and retreat from that sector. Failure to comply will be considered an act of war against humanity. The coup transmission ended, leaving the bridge of the Dominance in stunned silence. How did they respond so quickly? Vex Lear whispered. Mox Tyr closed the ancient text with a solemn gesture. The one rule: don't wake the humans. We broke it. Now we all face the consequences. Admiral Jack Nelson stood in the command center of Mars Base Alpha, watching as screens around him displayed awakening human installations across the galaxy. His uniform still fit perfectly despite the centuries that had passed. Like all military leaders, he had been kept in a state of readiness, his hibernation pod programmed to maintain his muscle tone through periodic microstimulation. Status report, he ordered, his voice firm and clear. 53 colony worlds reporting in, Admiral, responded his second-in-command, Captain Olivia Ward. Defensive grids active on all major installations. The fleet is powering up at all stations. Nelson nodded, studying the tactical display. Red dots marked known alien civilizations, with the newest, labeled Valkorians, flashing urgently, and the Dreamwalker? Still surrounded, sir. Commander Taylor reports 4 Valkorian prisoners. Their mothership hasn't moved. Nelson frowned. The protocols were clear. Any first contact scenario that resulted in hostility triggered full military readiness. But he hadn't survived this long by being rash. Contact the Arenthi Diplomatic Corps. I want to know everything about these Valkorians before we make our next move. Across the galaxy, ancient space stations hidden inside asteroid fields hummed to life. Massive warships, dormant for centuries, began powering up their systems. Humanity had not disappeared. They had merely been sleeping, their military might preserved in perfect readiness. On the Dreamwalker, Susan faced the alien captives. Kevin had rigged a more effective translator using the ship's systems and the aliens' own devices. Let's try again, Susan said firmly. Who are you, and why did you board our ship? The alien who seemed to be the leader, Traz Fen, responded cautiously. We are Valkorians. We found your ship drifting. We were curious about your technology. Despite the warning beacons? Susan pressed. Traz Fen's neck frills flattened in what might have been embarrassment. Our captain. He did not believe the warnings were serious. We are an expanding empire. We seek new technologies to aid our growth. Alan, who had been studying the aliens' biological readings, spoke up. Commander, their vital signs suggest they're telling the truth, at least as they understand it. Diane remained unconvinced. They took biological samples without consent. That's not just curiosity. Kevin interrupted from his console. Commander, I have Admiral Nelson on secure channel. Susan turned to the screen as Nelson's face appeared. Admiral, it's been a long time. 327 years to be exact, Commander. Good to see you awake. Nelson's expression was serious. I need a complete assessment of the situation there. 4 prisoners. No casualties on either side yet. Their mothership is holding position. We're attempting communication. Nelson nodded. I've contacted the Arenthi. They're sending representatives to explain the situation. Explain what situation, sir? Susan asked. Why we were sleeping in the first place. Apparently these Valkorians aren't the first species to make this mistake. On the Dominance, Captain Zexnar faced a crisis. His superiors in the Valkorian High Command had finally responded to his urgent message, and they were not pleased. You boarded an unknown vessel without proper authorization? Demanded High Commander Kexfor, his image flickering on the main screen. The ship appeared abandoned except for hibernating creatures, Zexnar explained. We saw an opportunity to acquire new technology. And now we face a potential war with a species we know nothing about, Kexfor hissed. A species that apparently has technology far beyond our own, given how quickly they responded across vast distances. Moxtier stepped forward. High Commander, if I may. The ancient texts suggest that humans were once a major power in this region. They apparently agreed to enter hibernation at the request of elder races like the Arenthi. The Arenthi? Kexfor's eyes narrowed. They control half the trade routes in the sector. Are you saying they have some arrangement with these humans? It appears so, High Commander. A second alarm sounded on the bridge. The tactical officer looked up in alarm. Captain, multiple ships approaching, design unknown. The screen shifted to show sleek vessels with smooth curves unlike the angular Valkorian ships. They moved with astonishing speed, surrounding the Dominance in perfect formation. We're being hailed, reported the communications officer. A new face appeared on screen. Neither human nor Valkorian, but a being with pale blue skin and large almond-shaped eyes. This is Ambassador Telazin of the Arenthi Diplomatic Corps. Valkorian vessel, stand down and prepare for mediation. Across the sector, similar scenes played out as ancient pacts were remembered and honored. The elder races, the Arenthi and their allies, the Moxarians, moved quickly to contain the situation. On Earth, the awakening continued. Cities that had been maintained by automated systems for centuries now saw their human populations stirring. In the Terran High Council chamber, recently revived politicians gathered to assess the situation. So the pact has been broken, said Council President Maria Lopez. After all these years. Not broken, Madam President. Forgotten. The speaker was an Arenthi ambassador named Selavine, who had remained on Earth as a liaison during the long sleep. The Valkorians are a young race. They did not exist when the agreement was made. That doesn't excuse their actions, argued Counselor Ryan Brown. They ignored clear warnings and invaded one of our ships. Selavin nodded. True, but perhaps this can be resolved without full-scale war. The Pact of Slumber was meant to keep peace, not start new conflicts. President Lopez looked thoughtful. Remind me again why we agreed to this pact. Your species expanded rapidly, Madam President. Your technology advanced at a pace that frightened many older civilizations. There were incidents, misunderstandings, that led to unnecessary conflicts. The elder races proposed that humans enter hibernation until the galaxy was more stable, more ready for your particular qualities. And now, the ambassador's expression grew troubled. Now we face a new imbalance. The Valkorians have been expanding aggressively, much as humans once did. Some among the elder races believe it is time for humans to return as a counterbalance. On Ba, the Dreamwalker, Susan received new orders from Admiral Nelson. Commander, we're implementing Operation Rescue. Your primary objective is to recover Alan Reeves. Susan blinked in confusion. Sir? Alan is here with me. Nelson's expression darkened. Check again, Commander. Susan turned and realized with horror that Alan was missing. In the confusion of communication with Earth and questioning the prisoners, no one had noticed him slip away. The Valkorians must have transported him out during the communication. Blackout, Kevin said, checking the internal sensors. Diane was already moving toward the weapons locker. We need to get him back. Susan turned back to Nelson's image. Admiral, we have a situation. Science Officer Reeves has been taken. Nelson's jaw tightened. That changes things. The Arenthi are pushing for peaceful resolution, but we don't negotiate. With hostage takers. Orders, sir? Nelson's eyes were cold as ice. Get him back, Commander. And show these Valkorians exactly why the galaxy feared us enough to ask us to sleep. Alan Reeves woke up strapped to a cold metal table. His head pounded and bright lights above made him squint. He tried to move his arms but found them secured tightly. Subject is conscious, said a Valkorian voice nearby. Alan turned his head, slightly to see several Valkorians in what appeared to be a laboratory. They wore protective coverings over their scaled skin, and observed him with a mix of curiosity and caution. Where am I? Alan asked, his voice hoarse. You are aboard the Dominance, answered one Valkorian who stepped closer. I am Chief Scientist Loxfen. We have questions about your species. Most people just ask, Alan replied. They don't kidnap and strap down the person they want to talk to. Loxfen's neck frills twitched. Your biological readings are fascinating. Your species appears physically fragile, yet the ancient texts speak of humans with great fear. We need to understand why. On the bridge of the Dominance, Captain Zexnar faced both the Arenthi diplomat and his superiors via communication link. The human must be returned immediately, insisted Ambassador Telezin. This action violates all diplomatic protocols and greatly increases the risk of conflict. High Commander Kexvor looked furious. You ordered a kidnapping while I was attempting to negotiate? Zexnar stood firm. We needed information. The human was taken before your communication arrived. Return him now, ordered Kexvor. The Valkorian Empire is not prepared for war with an unknown power, especially one apparently allied with the Arenthi. Not so simple, Zexnar replied. Our scientists have begun detailed analysis. Moving the subject now could compromise. New alarm blared across the bridge. The tactical officer looked up with wide eyes. Captain, the human vessel is moving. On the Dreamwalker, Susan, Diane, and Kevin had formulated a quick rescue plan. With the ship's AI handling most systems, the three of them could operate with minimal crew. Approaching the Dominance, Kevin reported from the pilot station. Their weapons are tracking us. Diane checked her tactical display. Multiple target. Locks. They're nervous. Susan opened a channel. Valkorian vessel, this is Commander Taylor. We demand the immediate return of our crew member. This is your only warning. The response came quickly. Dreamwalker, maintain distance. Any approach will be considered hostile action. Susan smiled grimly. Exactly as expected. Diane, deploy countermeasures. Kevin, execute approach pattern Delta. The small human ship suddenly accelerated toward the much larger Valkorian vessel. From its hull, dozens of small objects launched, spreading out in a cloud pattern. What are those? Demanded Zexnar on the Dominance bridge. Unknown devices, replied the tactical officer. Too small for weapons, possibly communication relays or scanning devices. Destroy them, ordered Zexnar. The Dominance's point defense systems opened fire, destroying several of the small objects. But for each one destroyed, 3 more seemed to appear. They're multiplying, reported the tactical officer. Impossible. Zexnar hissed. Ambassador Telezin watched with knowing eyes. Not impossible, Captain, it's human technology. Adaptive micro-drones with replication capabilities. The cloud of tiny drones surrounded the Dominance, attaching themselves to the hull at various points. Inside the laboratory, Loxfen felt the slight vibration as they made contact. What's happening? Alan asked, noticing the Valkorian's distress. Before Loxfen could answer, the lights flickered and went out, replaced by dim emergency lighting. The restraints holding Alan suddenly released. Security breach, shouted one of the assistants. The human ship has somehow accessed our systems. Alan didn't waste time asking questions. He slid off the table and looked for an exit. The laboratory, doctor, was sealed, but he noticed a ventilation duct near the floor, small for a Valkorian but perfect for a human. In Earth orbit, Admiral Nelson watched the operation unfold via faster-than-light communication. Beside him stood President Lopez and the Arenthi ambassador. "Your people are using forbidden technology," Sullivan observed with concern. The replicating drones were specifically mentioned in the hibernation agreement. "They attacked first," Nelson replied calmly. "And our technology was never surrendered, merely unused during our sleep." President Lopez turned to the ambassador. "You said some among the elder races wanted humans to return as a counterbalance to the Valkorians. Is this what you meant?" "Not exactly," Sullivan admitted. "We hoped for diplomatic engagement, not military confrontation." "Then you should have woken us gradually," Nelson said, "not waited until a crisis forced our hand." Back on the Dominance, chaos spread as systems failed across the ship. The microdrones had infiltrated critical junctions, giving Kevin remote access to the Valkorian computers. "I've located Alan," Kevin reported on the Dreamwalker. "Deck 7, Section 12. Life. Sign stable." "Nice work," Susan replied. "Diane, ready for boarding?" Diane checked her gear one last time. "Ready, Commander." "Remember, this is a rescue mission, not an invasion. Get Alan and get out." In the confusion aboard the Dominance, few noticed the small shuttle that detached from the Dreamwalker and approached a secondary airlock. Unlike the main docking bays, these maintenance airlocks were designed for external repair drones, or in this case, a determined human security officer. Diane cut through the airlock using tools designed for exactly this purpose. Once inside, she moved quickly through the corridors, guided by Kevin's directions through her earpiece. "2 Valkorians approaching from the left," Kevin warned. Diane flattened herself against a wall, activating the adaptive camouflage of her suit. The Valkorians rushed past, too focused on the ship's failures to notice the human hiding in plain sight. Alan, meanwhile, had crawled through the ventilation system until he found a larger maintenance shaft. He was trying to find his way to an escape pod or shuttle bay when he heard familiar voices in his mind. "Alan, can you hear me?" It was Susan's voice, transmitted directly through a subdermal communicator all crew members had implanted. "Susan? How?" "No time to explain. Diane is on board. Head toward Section 14. Kevin's sending navigation data to your neural link." A map appeared in Alan's mind, projected by his neural implant. He followed the highlighted path, marveling at how much of their advanced technology had been maintained during their long sleep. On the bridge of the Dominance, Zexnar watched his ship fall apart around him. Primary systems were failing, backups were compromised, and now reports came in of a human intruder on board. "How is this possible?" he demanded of no one in particular. "Their ship is tiny compared to ours." Ambassador Telazin had maintained her calm throughout. "This is why the elder races feared humans, Captain. Not for their numbers or their strength, but for their adaptability and innovation. One human ship is now defeating your most powerful warship." Moxtier, who had been analyzing data from the ship's few functioning sensors, looked up with alarm. "Captain, the human fleet has arrived." The main view screen flickered to life, showing a sight that made every Valkorian on the bridge freeze in terror. Dozens of massive warships had appeared seemingly from nowhere, surrounding not just the Dominance but the entire Valkorian fleet that had been rushing to their captain's aid. The ships were unlike anything the Valkorians had ever seen. Smooth, curved vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved with impossible precision, forming a perfect blockade. "All Valkorian vessels. This is Admiral Jack Nelson of Earth Command. Your empire has committed an act of war against humanity. The time for diplomacy has ended." As these words echoed across every Valkorian ship, Diane found Alan. Together, they made their way to the airlock where her shuttle waited. "Perfect timing," Alan said as they sealed the airlock behind them. "Commander Taylor runs a tight schedule," Diane replied with a grim smile. "Let's get out of here before the real fireworks start." As their shuttle raced back to the Dreamwalker, they looked back at the Dominance. The once proud warship now floated powerless, surrounded by humanity's awakened might. On Earth, President Lopez watched the unfolding scene with a mixture of pride and concern. "What happens now, Admiral?" Nelson's face remained impassive. Now, Madam President, we remind the galaxy why they asked us to sleep in the first place. 1 year had passed since the Valkorians woke humanity from its long sleep. The galaxy had changed dramatically in that time. Susan Taylor stood by the window in her new office on the Galactic Council station, looking out at the stars. Her uniform now bore the insignia of a diplomatic ambassador rather than a military commander. The transition had not been easy for her. "Ambassador Taylor, the council is ready for you," said her assistant from the doorway. Susan nodded and straightened her jacket. "Thank you, Mira." The Galactic Council chamber was a vast circular room with representatives from over 30 species seated in tiered sections. Humans had been granted a permanent seat after the events with the Valkorians, much to the displeasure of some older members. As Susan took her place at the human delegation's table, she noticed the empty seats in the Valkorian section. Once a proud empire spanning 17 systems, the Valkorians now controlled only their homeworld and 3 colony planets. The rest had been divided among other powers or granted independence under human protection. This council will now discuss the petition from Valkorian representatives seeking reduction of reparation payments, announced the Arenthi chairperson, Tella Zinn. Susan listened as the remaining Valkorian diplomat, a young female named Teslar, made her case. Unlike her predecessors, Teslar had embraced diplomacy rather than military might. "Our people struggled to rebuild," Teslar explained. "The current payment schedule leaves little for essential services. We ask for mercy, not forgiveness." Several council members shifted uncomfortably. All remembered how swiftly the Valkorian Empire had fallen. After the rescue of Alan Reeves, Admiral Nelson had given the Valkorians 1 day to surrender unconditionally. When they refused, humanity demonstrated why they had been feared. No massive bombardments, no planet-destroying weapons. Instead, humans used their superior technology to systematically dismantle the Valkorian military infrastructure. Weapons stopped working, ships lost power, communication networks fell silent. Then human forces moved in with surgical precision, capturing key leaders and installations with minimal casualties. Within 1 week, an empire that had taken 2 centuries to build was reduced to ash. Susan stood to address the council. Humanity supports reducing the Valkorian reparations by 30%, with the condition that these resources be directed toward civilian infrastructure and education. Murmurs spread through the chamber. No one had expected humans to show leniency. Since their awakening, humans had established themselves as the dominant military power in the sector, with technological capabilities that surpassed even the elder races in many areas. In the audience gallery, Alan Reeves watched with interest. His experiences as a Valkorian captive had changed him, driving him to study their culture and psychology. He now served as a cultural liaison between humans and Valkorians, working to build bridges where others saw only enemies. "The motion is accepted," declared Tella Zinn after the vote. "This council is adjourned until tomorrow." As the delegates filed out, Susan found herself walking beside Teslar. "Thank you, Ambassador Taylor," the young Valkorian said softly. "My people will remember this kindness." Susan nodded. "We were both pawns in a larger game, Teslar. It's time we wrote our own rules." Later that evening, Susan met with Admiral Nelson in a secure conference room. Despite the victory and humanity's new position in the galaxy, Nelson remained vigilant. "The Arenthi are hiding something," he said without preamble. "Our intelligence suggests they deliberately manipulated the Valkorians into waking us." Susan frowned. "Why would they do that? They were the ones who arranged our hibernation in the first place." "Balance of power," Nelson replied, pulling up a galactic map. "The Arenthi dominate trade. The Moxarians control technology. Both feared the Valkorians' military expansion, so they used us as a counterweight." "You're saying they sacrificed the Valkorian Empire?" "I'm saying they're playing a very long game, and we're just one piece on their board." Susan considered this. During her year as ambassador, she had noticed patterns in Arenthi behavior that suggested deeper motives than mere peacekeeping. What do you recommend? She asked. Caution, Nelson said. Maintain our military readiness while appearing diplomatic, and investigate what else happened during our sleep. The next morning, Susan met Alan for breakfast in the station's garden. Dome. The artificial environment reminded them both of Earth, with its blue sky simulation and carefully maintained plants. How are the Valkorian studies going? Susan asked. Alan smiled. Fascinating. Did you know their society was actually quite peaceful until about 100 years ago? Something changed them, drove them toward expansion and militarization. What changed? I'm not sure yet. Their historical records become strangely incomplete around that time, almost as if someone edited them. Susan thought about Nelson's suspicions regarding the Arenthi. Keep looking, she said. It might be important. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a small Valkorian child. He approached their table hesitantly, clutching a datapad. Ambassador Taylor? The child asked. Susan smiled. Yes? I am Tesnar. My school assignment is to interview someone from another species. Would you answer some questions for me? Susan recognized the name. This was the nephew of Captain Zexnar, who had first boarded the Dreamwalker. The captain now sat in a human prison, but his family had been spared in the post-war settlements. Of course, Susan said, gesturing to an empty chair. The child climbed up, looking nervously between Susan and Alan. My first question is, why did humans agree to sleep? Susan glanced at Alan, then back at the child. That's a complex question, Tesnar. My uncle says it was because you were afraid. But that doesn't make sense because you're so strong. Susan considered her words carefully. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is choose not to use your strength. Centuries ago, humans were expanding rapidly. We were innovative but also aggressive. The elder races feared we would dominate the galaxy or trigger destructive wars. They asked us to sleep until the galaxy was more stable, more ready for our particular qualities. And you just agreed? The child seemed amazed. Our leaders saw wisdom in it. They believed that time would temper both our species and the galaxy. And they left safeguards to ensure we could return if needed. Tesnar scribbled notes on his pad. Last question. Are humans still angry at Valkorians? Susan smiled gently. We don't blame children for their parents' mistakes. Your people woke us up, yes. But now we have a chance to build something better together. As the child thanked her and left, Alan raised an eyebrow. Diplomatic to the end. Not just diplomatic, Susan replied. True. The galaxy is changing, Alan. The old empire is ash, but from ashes, new things grow. Above them, the simulated sky showed stars becoming visible as the artificial day cycle ended. Among those stars, human ships patrolled, human colonies thrived, and a new chapter in galactic history was being written. The one rule had been broken. The humans were awake. And they remembered not just how to fight, but also how to forgive.